Hey everybody, thank you for joining me today. We are gonna make two dishes that are a little bit lighter. We're gonna start with a soup that is gonna be perfect for springtime. We're gonna make pasta fagioli, or if you're from New York, pasta fagioli. It is a soup made with pasta and beans. So that's our first recipe today. And for our second recipe, we're gonna make an olive oil cake, which is a light, airy, moist cake. So let's start with our soup. First thing we need to do is put some olive oil in our soup pot. And you'll notice I've got a fairly large soup pot. One thing whenever you're cooking pasta and you're putting a lot of ingredients in, you want to make sure that you've got a big enough pot so that all the ingredients aren't overcrowded and don't cook well. So start with a nice big sauce pot. We'll get our olive oil in there and get this warmed up. And my stovetop heats up really, really fast, sometimes too fast. While that is getting warm, I've got carrots and celery, and we're gonna dice some onion, and that's called mirepoix. It's kind of like your setup. For most sauces and most soups, you're gonna start with those three ingredients. I'm gonna go ahead and cut this onion, and you'll notice the sizes of my celery and the carrots are the same, so I'm gonna cut that onion the same size. That way they'll all cook at the same time. One won't cook faster than the other. So the first thing I do, if you've never cut an onion, and you've probably seen video after video after video of this, but this is the way professional chefs do it. There's a hairy end and the not hairy end. You wanna cut off the not hairy end. This actually holds your onion together so it doesn't fall apart while you're cutting it. Then cut it in half. And I always like this. So, you know, on TV, people are like, oh, they're peeling it so fast. And you're like, I can't peel it that fast. Instead of trying to peel just the skin, get that first layer. That's the easiest way to get through that fast. And if you can't remember which end or how you're cutting it, doesn't that look like a little fishy? So once you peel it back, it should still be attached and look like a little fish. Okay. So the next thing we're gonna do is we're gonna cut it horizontally, and we wanna cut it the size of this, right? So for this onion, I'll probably get maybe 3 cuts. And I'm gonna go straight across, fingers up, so I don't cut my fingers. One more. Oh, see, that's why you have your hand up, because if my fingers were down, I would have, that would have been fun on TV. Okay, and then we're gonna go down. And again, same width that you're trying to get in your dices. And then you come back and go down this way, and see, nice little chunk. So that is how you quickly dice an onion. Perfect. All right, let me get that skin out of the way. I think our oil is hot, and we are going to put our carrots, celery, onion without the skin, and I'm gonna let these soften over like medium heat. If your oil's too hot, turn it down a little bit, because again, you're not trying to brown these, you're just trying to get them soft. And a good way to know if everything's soft is those onions will get translucent. And so as soon as that happens, we're gonna add our garlic. Safer to add garlic after you've already got some other things in your pot because it burns so quickly. And so this kind of protects it from getting scorched and bitter. So we'll add some garlic. And then we will add our beans. I'm gonna need to strain these. Some people like to put a little bit of the juice. If you want some of that starchiness, that starchy water to kind of thicken your soup, I would add a little bit of the brine that it's sitting in, but I like to rinse my beans before I put it in my soup. So let me go ahead and take care of that. We'll be right back. I've drained the beans, and I'm using 2 kinds of beans here. I'm using cannellini and barlotti. They are both an Italian product. and I got them from Italy. And if you look at the can, it actually says fagioli, because fagioli means beans in Italian. So we'll add our beans. We don't really need those to kind of brown or anything, so let's go ahead and add our tomato products. I'm using an Italian fresh tomato, diced tomato. And then of course that lovely sauce that I like from Italy. It's the Moody brand. And I don't know, I'm an environmentalist, so I love that it's in glass because you can, upcycle the glass and reuse it. And if you do want to recycle it, it's totally recyclable. And you don't get that tinniness that you would from canned products. So I love using this tomato puree. And then, of course, this is gonna be like a sauce right now because it's too thick. So we're gonna add some chicken stock. And let's add our herbs. So I've got Italian herbs. There's basil, oregano, rosemary. And I like a lot of herbs in my soup. Bring out that flavor. Fresh parsley. Crushed red pepper. Now, depending on how spicy you like your soup, that's a good amount to put in there. You could probably do half of that if you want it not as spicy, but I'm a redhead, I like things spicy. So I'm gonna put that whole thing in there. And then bay leaf. And last but not least, I like to put cheese rind in my soup. It really just creates a different level of flavor. It creates kind of like an unctuousness and an earthy and a nuttiness to your soup. So we're just gonna toss that rind in. And this needs to simmer, I would say at least 20 minutes, but the longer you have to let it simmer, the more those flavors are gonna develop. And let's not forget either, we have to season everything. So let's add some salt. If you were trying to reduce this and like lose some liquid, I would say salt it at the end, but we don't want to lose any liquid. We want it to stay soupy. So I'm gonna go ahead and add my salt and pepper now, and then we're gonna cover it so that we don't have any liquid evaporate. And once this is kind of the flavor that you want, then we're gonna add our pasta. You can use a small pasta. I found these little farfallini, and they're so cute. They're the little bow tie pasta, but they're so tiny. You could use a ditalini pasta. If you're using a fresh pasta, you're gonna wanna put that in about 3 to 4 minutes before you serve the soup. We'll put this in about 10 minutes before we're ready to serve the soup, because if we put it in now, they're gonna overcook and kind of decompose as we let this simmer. So we'll let it simmer till we're about ready. 10 minutes before we're about to plate it, we will toss in our pasta. So we are ready to enjoy our pasta fagioli, or fagioli is what a lot of people call it. But fagioli is the correct pronunciation in Italian. And I put the pasta in about 10 minutes ago. So it is al dente. It's got a little bit of tooth to it, but it's definitely cooked. Piping hot, but it is a beautiful, look at that, hearty soup. A little more broth. This is great for a lunch, or if you wanted a lighter dinner. And just to give it some pizzazz, I've got some fresh Parmigiano Reggiano. I'm just gonna shave some of that on top. Oh, look at that, it's pretty. It's getting nice and melty in there because the soup is hot. And if you want to wow your guests, put a little green on there. This is parsley because we used parsley in the dish. Whenever you garnish, you always want to make sure you use something edible. Don't ever use something not edible as your garnish. And there you have it, pasta fagioli. For our second recipe today, we're going to make an olive oil cake. What makes this unique is that olive oil is going to give it a rich, robust flavor, but you want to make sure you use a really good olive oil. So we're going to use Roy, which is from Italy, and Italians produce some of the best olive oil in the world. So make sure if you're doing an olive oil cake that you're using a really high quality olive oil. So to start, we're gonna get our pan ready. That way we're not having to fuss with that after we get the batter made. So the first thing you wanna do is cut some parchment paper out. This actually helps you get the cake out of the pan and keeps it from sticking. Now, I want this to stick. So if you haven't seen me do this before, I save the wrappers from my butter because it's an easy way to grease your pan. So you just take that and rub your pan. Look at that. Easy peasy. We're gonna put that parchment paper in. And all I did was set this down on a piece of parchment paper and draw it, you know, a circle and then cut it out. And then we're gonna grease that as well. Okay, so our pan's ready to go. Now we wanna combine our dry ingredients. We've got flour, we've got some baking soda and baking powder. And for the measurements, this recipe will be on my website, and just a pinch of salt. And we wanna go ahead and combine those together. That way when we put it into the liquid part of this recipe, you're not getting clumps of baking powder in one spot or another. It's already all combined. Next thing is combining your fat and your sugar. So if you were using butter instead of olive oil, it's the part where you cream the butter and sugar. So the sugar, the olive oil, look at that beautiful color of that oil. And oil, the fat in your cake also is what helps keep your cake from drying out. I would say the M word, but I know a lot of people don't like that word. So we want to go ahead and let this go, combine till it's kind of, not just mixed, but creates kind of a fluffy texture. And while that's doing its thing, let's go ahead and get our eggs ready. We're gonna add one egg at a time, but I'm going to pre-crack these because if I did this and I dropped a shell in there, I probably would have to start over. The other thing too, if you notice when I crack an egg, I always do it on a flat surface. Don't do it on the edge of a bowl. If you crack it on an edge of a cup or a bowl, sometimes you can introduce bacteria up into the raw egg. So always do it on a flat surface. And we'll do all three. And that's looking nice and fluffy. So we will take one egg at a time. Bloop. And make sure that gets fully combined before we add our next egg. And then the last one. Then we're gonna add vanilla. And one thing that gives olive oil cake some flavor is to add some lemon and orange. In an Italian olive oil cake, you're always gonna find lemon zest and orange zest. So we'll add that. And you get a little bit more flavor from zest than you do juice. Important though, when you are zesting your lemons and oranges, you don't wanna get down to the white part. That's called the pith, and that can make things bitter. So just get the skin. And once that has come together, you know my favorite part, it's the flour. I'm gonna turn it down so it doesn't spray all over me. And I've got milk. We're gonna alternate. So flour and a little bit of milk. Let that kind of mix together. We'll do more flour. Usually do it in thirds. Easy cake. And this is from scratch. You don't have to buy box cake anymore. It's so easy to make a cake from scratch. If I can do it, you can do it. And then we'll get the last of that flour in. Maybe, I told you, I make a mess when I bake. And here I am thinking if I used a cup instead of a bowl, I wouldn't make as big of a mess. I just have to remember not to touch my dress. I mean, that makes baking fun, right? Put in the last little bit of milk. And I'm gonna stop it for a second and scrape down the sides. Again, if you see that there's ingredients kind of stuck to the sides, sometimes you want to get to the bottom underneath the paddle, just to make sure everything's really getting combined well. You can stop and scrape it down. Don't try to scrape it while the paddle's going, you'll be like, I mean, it's not fun baking if you don't make a mess, right? I promise it won't affect the way the cake tastes. Okay, everything's combined, not too overworked. We are gonna take this down, take that off. And then this goes into our cake pan. It goes in a 350-degree oven for about 33 to 35 minutes, depending on your oven. You want to make sure that the cake is set, but it still has a little bit of bounce in the center. So in about 30 minutes, we will have a beautiful Italian olive oil cake. Okay, our cake came out of the oven. I did let it rest on a wire rack for about 10 minutes, and the reason you want to do that is to let the air circulate around it as it cools, and that'll help it come out of your cake pan easier. Now, it's a beautiful cake as is, but you don't want to serve it without some, jazziness, some zhuzh. So you can sprinkle powdered sugar on it. That's typically how it's served. You can serve it with some fresh berries. If you want to add some designs, a cool trick is you can lay parchment paper over the cake or aluminum foil and create, patterns, and then sprinkle it with powdered sugar. And I mean, people are doing all sorts of fun stuff with their cakes these days, but I'm just simple. I like it, the traditional way. So we're gonna sprinkle it with the powdered sugar. Now, if I was presenting this entire cake on a dinner table, I would probably put the fruit on the cake itself, but let's cut into this and make a pretty single serving. Another trick when you cut cake, you know how that first piece is always so hard to get out? If you actually cut it in thirds and take that center piece out, look at how pretty and easy that came out. Put a little more powdered sugar so it dusts the plate a little bit. And then let's add some fresh berries. I've got some blueberries, some blackberries. That look pretty? And that's a beautifully moist Italian olive oil cake. I just shared with you 2 simple, easy recipes to make at home. We did pasta fagioli and we did a beautiful Italian olive oil cake. Of course, you know me, I pair everything with some wine. You could have coffee with your cake if you want to, some cappuccino or espresso, but I'm gonna have my wine with it. If you want those recipes, please follow me on jenniferbasil.com, and there's links to all my social media on my website.